Oh, welcome. Welcome, welcome, dear community. It is truly an honor to have each and every one of you here today. My name is Anna Shoemaker, and I'm here to serve as your Zoom host and logistical point person for the duration of the Brave Space BIPOC program. If you choose to join this transformative journey with us here. I am a Mexican American with indigenous ancestry to the Purepecha, and I'm a transracially adopted. My pronouns are she, her, and my feet are touching the Wichita, Tawakoni, Kickapoo, and Humanos here in Dallas, Texas. So as you settle into this virtual space, I request that if possible, you share in the chat box where you're joining us from and how you're doing today. It's always heartwarming to witness the breadth of our community, even across the distances that we have. I want to express my gratitude to each of you for taking the time out of your day to be part of this free info webinar. So now, to ensure a smooth and productive session, I would like to go over a few logistics here. First, our session will be recorded, as you noticed when you came in, for those who registered but could not attend. Please ensure that your microphones are muted during the presentation to minimize background noise. And you can unmute yourself during the Q&A question portion. If you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, feel free to reach out to me during the chat function, using the chat function anytime during this Zoom call. We've allocated time for a question and answer session at the end of the presentation, as well as a time for you all to get to connect and meet each other. If you have any burning questions or specific topics you'd like to address, please jot them down as they come to mind. Ruth will do her best to cover as many questions as possible within the given time that we have today. Finally, if you can do us a favor and answer the poll question I'm going to put up right here, it'll help us get our breakout rooms organized for later. So let me just add the poll quiz here. I'm going to launch it right now. If you can do that anytime throughout this call, that would be wonderful. Great. So as you all know, we're here to learn about the Brave Space for BIPOC leaders, our Starship program at the Mindful Race Institute. This program is designed to last a year and focus on racial inquiry, racial affinity, and relational development. With the guidance of Ruth King, you will participate in a peer-led study group that will help you address your own biases and behavior that perpetuate racism. Through this inner work, you will gain the tools to promote racial healing and cultivate a deeper sense of racial well-being. So I look forward to connecting with all of you and supporting Ruth King and all of your technical needs. So with that, you can get your applause emojis ready, because I will happily turn it over to the founder of Mindful Race Institute, Ruth King.
Thank you so much, Anna, and welcome everyone. It's so good to see you. So good to see many of you that I've known for many years, and many of you that I look forward to knowing. I think most of you know who I am. I'm joining you from my home office here in Charlotte, North Carolina, the territory of the Kadaba tribe and peoples, my African lineage that serve this land and so many lands, and the strength of their wisdom and resilience living through my body and bones are all with you. I join all of you and welcome you. I have waited for this opportunity to really have a cohort of BIPOC juicy leaders who are out there doing important work in the world, to hold you, to support you, to see how we strengthen our capacity to be stable and clear and impactful in the work we're doing in these bodies. So I have a lot I want to say to you today to kind of get us grounded in an understanding of what this program is, how it serves, what you can expect throughout the year, and answer any questions that you have about it. So I'm going to be sharing some notes with you that supports us in looking at just the context of this program. So let me just start by saying, in terms of affinity group work, I'm imagining that we've all been in racial affinity groups, or that we have led groups, or that we have been in positions of facilitating racial awareness, or the subtle ways that race and racism might be at play given the work that we do. Some of this is just inherently what we do in our bodies, and a lot of it is our official role. But as you know, race is just always playing. Now, just looking at affinity group work that happens in most places, especially within organizations, most affinity groups are pulled together because organizations either request them, or we come together because we know we need to gather our thoughts and attempts to influence the systems that we're in. Sometimes we sign up for these experiences. We enter them with high hopes of being able to make a difference. We're often tossed into these roles because we are BIPOC people, not so much because we have the skills to facilitate culture change, but there's a blanket assumption sometimes that's laid on top of us that because we are colored folks, we ought to know everything there is to know about race, and that just doesn't happen. But sometimes we collude with that, so we want to watch out for that as well. But we find ourselves in these BIPOC groups. Sometimes they're of our choosing, granted. And the focus tends to center on a common enemy, if you will, or a common problem, which is white folks, or the behavior of white folks, or the systems that are white driven and unconscious around racial impact. We're often in these roles responsible for influencing the system, for informing the system without the power to influence the system into a real change. So our meetings lack a sense of structure. Sometimes they lack a sense of intimacy among us as a BIPOC body. Oftentimes, affinity groups become gripe sessions or grief sessions. The content of what we're talking about feels very personal. I've heard many people share that they feel defeated, they become disenchanted, there's high frustration, and then there's a sense of burnout. And then if we have a rupture between us, we don't always know what to do. We don't know how to re-enter or connect. And so we find ourselves distancing or turning away, or there's kind of a deflation in our energy, which is really heartbreak, maybe even heartburn that happens. So, we fragment, we kind of splinter. And that's just painful, to say the least. It's kind of a suffering on top of suffering, because the work of affinity group is still an attempt to try to change systems, raise awareness, influence spaces that support a sense of wholeness and holiness within our collective field. And then as BIPOC leaders, we're challenged with, if we're not in the affinity group, oftentimes we're challenged with facilitating or intervening on those systems, right? Those constructions of racial complexity. And our truth telling often feels agonizing, fatiguing, at times hopeless. The pain that we experience is often invisible. We kind of deny it within ourselves. It's invisible to the people we're serving. It's invisible to other people that look like us often. Because when we talk about our pain, we're usually talking about the pains of the system. We're not talking about what's happening with each other. So that the people that care about us the most, that conversation, that texture of witnessing and connecting and nurturing or supporting each other doesn't always become a priority in our circles and in our spheres of influence. So there can be feelings of isolation, and we can begin to question ourselves about, why the hell am I doing this? After all these years, am I still doing this? And we run on fumes and can feel a bit cut off from ourselves and each other. And then we convince ourselves that we just have to push through and that there's no other way. So these are just some of the things I think we in our bodies are dealing with often when it comes to affinity group work and influencing groups around racial awareness, social change, organizational diversity, equity, inclusion kinds of efforts. And just our own sensitive membrane, if you will, of what it feels like being in groups when you have a certain kind of awareness and nobody else is kind of seeing what you're seeing. That pull of the heart that kind of pulls you into saying things, doing things, taking risks, and then feeling a bit, sometimes destabilized by the response, the inadequate response, and so on. So these are some of the reasons why I felt calling together a brave space BIPOC group that is in this work, coming together to really form a group of support, form a group of nurturance, form a group where you are learning skills to navigate the territory of whiteness more effectively and more fortified, because you have been immersed in an experience of intimacy, of connection, of a deep examination of how you perceive and the quality of your presence when you're doing this work. So I think it's important. Thomas Merton, the Trappist monk, theologian, mystic, poet, and social activist, says something that I think is so powerful for us. I'll read this. He says, there is a pervasive form of contemporary violence to which the idealist most easily succumbs: activism and overwork. The rush and pressure of modern life are the most common forms of its innate violence. The frenzy of our activism neutralizes our work for peace. It destroys our own inner capacity for peace. It destroys the fruitfulness of our own work because it kills the root of inner wisdom, which makes work fruitful. And I think this is powerful because as we are doing the work that must be done, that we almost can't separate ourselves from doing or don't even want to necessarily. There is a kind of subtle form of violence that we self-inflict if we're not aware of that happening, and if we're not deeply rooted in our own understanding of how we're deeply woven into the very systems we're trying to influence and transform. And that as we begin to pick that thread out of the tapestry and shed light on it, shed light on our own sense of racial conditioning, how we've been conditioned to be with race, respond to race, how our nervous system is in the face of race, in the face of conflict. This is just stuff we want to wake up to and support each other in doing that. And as you know, I don't know about your experience, but I know about mine, as a person in a leadership role, as a teacher, as in this Black body, this elder body, seldom do we stop. Do we get to know the depth of our kinship as BIPOC folks? Seldom do we talk about our distinction, our literal journey, and how they're different from each other. As BIPOC people, we tend to be socialized at the group level, but our distinction becomes invisible, our distinct experiences. There's a presumed solidarity that we have about each other that hasn't been vetted. We haven't really talked to each other about our experiences and how they're different and how challenging it can be to get to be together. We haven't talked about our loneliness from our efforts to belong to each other. We haven't been in a position where we're able to be nourished by each other, or to celebrate our skills and our stories and of courage, creativity, and comfort, the ways we've comforted or may need to comfort ourselves. So our individual distinction in these racial bodies have been dwarfed by the enormity of racism and the sea of racism that we are attempting to swim in. And I just have to admit, I miss my people when I'm doing this work. I miss the friendship, the fellowship, because we're busy, we're running in so many different directions, and the needs are real, right? So I'm not faulting that, but I think we need each other in order to be fortified, to be nurtured, to remember, and to serve deeply and with wise awareness in what it is that we're doing. And it's not so easy to turn toward each other in this work and to rest our attention there. I love what Toni Cade Bambara says, beautiful in the Black Woman. She says, "It is so much easier to be out there than right here." The question does become at some point, who are we in the absence of addressing white people and the systems of whiteness? I don't think we're there yet, may not be in this lifetime, but what an important question, I think, to ask. who are we in the absence of them being centered? Who are we when we center ourselves? So that's what this Brave Space leadership program is intending to do. We're looking at experiencing within affinity group. You know, affinity group work is kind of replicates the experiences of how we are in our lives. So we get a chance to really see how we are in our lives through this graduation of a year-long program. We get to settle in and know ourselves and live an experience of group, live an experience of connection in this way. In a structured way, this program is structured. I mean, what you could expect in this program is there's a combination of you meeting with your racial affinity group and you doing some preparatory work and practice work from instructions that's on the portal. So every 30 days, you're going to get a lesson plan. And the lesson plan has 3 components to it. There's going to be opportunities where you are contemplating your racial conditioning. So there's going to be questions you're asked to engage, to think about, to journal about. You're going to receive meditation instructions and practices to practice throughout that month. When you meet with your racial affinity group, there's 3 sections there that you'll be given attention to. One is sharing your racial conditioning questions. The second is looking at having a discussion period where you talk about what it's like to talk about race to each other. And then there's going to be a section where you engage each other around relevance, around integration of what you're learning and the relevance it has to what you're doing in your world of service. So this is a structured process. The focus is internal. It's centered on your conditioning and your impact. It graduates over the years. So we're intentionally examining how we progress through 3 stages of group life. We start at the inclusion stage and look at inclusion needs. We then move to stages of conflict and control and our impulses and tendencies and perceptions that happen when we're in that stage of development with a group. And then we progress to examining more intimately what belonging is, because sometimes we think we just overuse the word without earning it. You know, you got to go through some stages in order to really know deeply what belonging is. Yeah. So there are the questions that you're asked around your racial conditioning. I just want you to know that I'm not an expert on your racial identity and journey. So the questions that you're asked are meant to open you up and have you share what that is. And so you become the resource of educating on your particular racial identity. The questions are just aiding you in opening that path. And then every other month, I will join you and all of the racial affinity groups will come together and we'll talk about how the program is helping you, particularly around integration of what you're learning and its application in your role as a leader. And I'll be adding different ways for you to have more impact, and you'll be helping each other do that as well. So yeah, I think what we're trying to do is we're learning how to navigate and influence these systems that we're in. And once we get that, a lot of these systems are not personal. They're just structures that were created really not so much with us in mind, or exploitive, unconscious around impact, sometimes deliberate, but we're in these systems and we're wanting to be able to influence them with more stability and clarity. And this requires that we know ourselves and we know our impact and we know how we're contributing to well-being or moving or contributing to madness. So we can wake up to that, and we can immediately wake up to it when we're in a group experience. So I think that's probably all I need to say at this time. And I want to make sure we have good time for Q&A. I'd like to just say that a number of the questions that were asked already in advance have centered around the fees and the scholarship mainly, and is there more scholarship funds available? A lot of consideration has gone into the pricing of this year-long intensive, and we're going to do our best. There is a small grant that we've received that supports partial scholarships. We're asking you to pick a level of payment that that you can offer. We are able to offer a 3-month payment plan. And the degree to which we can offer more of a scholarship will depend on the level that others are paying. So it's a lot of moving parts. But we ask that if you are interested, to submit the application and to just let us know where you are, and we'll just do our best to try to accommodate what you're offering. But we're hoping we can, cover the program integrity, and also cover and respect the needs of the broader community. So know that we will do our best. I'd like to invite Novelette, who is one of the graduates of our first cohort of this program, to just share a few words about how this program impacted her, particularly as a BIPOC leader. She owns a consulting business. She's been involved in culture change for a while, and she went through the year-long program. And I think she might be able to just share briefly her perspective on how this program helped her as a BIPOC person and also as a leader in her field. So I'm wondering, Anna, if you can highlight Novelette and invite her to say a few words.
Thank you, Ruth. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, awesome. I also want to say that I'm not able to parse out the personal and the professional. So my comments and remarks are both interwoven into who I am as a person, as well as how it informs my work. So I'm going to situate myself. So my name is Novelette Demicado. My pronouns are she, her, and her. I'm calling in from the land of the Pawtuckets, which is also known as Medford, Mass. I am the daughter of Yulie Mae Dixon and Herbert Demicado. I pay homage to both my parents because they're both no longer alive. And part of my experience with the year-long program is really looking at my legacy. Who are my people? And that's been a profound learning and leaning into. I'm a naturalized citizen of the United States, and I was born on the island of Jamaica. So that's important for me to land in that space and own that cultural nuance. I've been intrigued by Ruth's work for many, many years and had the great pleasure of participating in the dedicated practitioner program with Spirit Rock, where I experienced her teaching, and that only fueled my desire more and more to be part of the year-long program. And when the opportunity presented itself, it was perfect as well as extremely difficult. We were in the midst of a global pandemic, a racial unrest. We were reckoning with George Floyd's murder and many brown and Black bodies who were murdered. And my mom also passed during that time. So I was primed to explore my racialization. I was primed to acknowledge the identities that I had not acknowledged, and the identities that I made quiet, because it was easier to quiet them in spaces where I wanted to assimilate. And that's really important to understand as somebody who is an immigrant and has also experienced what it's like to be othered by an accent, by cultural differences in the dominant culture. So that year long really shook me up. And I say that in the greatest and loving way. My monthly affinity group was both rewarding and challenging. It was an opportunity to witness my vulnerability and aspects of myself that I never, ever publicly acknowledged. And at times I was crawling out of my skin. And I remember reaching out to Ruth. And I remember feeling that I had a trusted and safe space to be okay with the discomfort. Ruth created that by being available to answer the questions outside. And it wasn't that I hit the send button the first time I felt the discomfort. I waited a while. I waited like into the third, fourth cycle of discomfort because I wanted to work through what was this all about. Each exploratory monthly question was like a haiku. Yes, I'm answering a question which requires a rational mind to answer it. Yet if I sat with it long enough and felt into the question, what was it calling me to be aware of? And that's how I approach my monthly questions, and then what I brought into my affinity exploration. That practice and habit has allowed me to sit in spaces professionally where I'm sitting with the discomfort and also asking myself, what is the truth that I need to be paying attention to? Knowing it's relative truth, and there are many truths in the space, and how do I make space for that? The culmination of the year was we wrote a racial memoir, which was extremely challenging for me, and I experimented with poetry as well as essay. And because I was grieving the loss of my mom, I was grieving many things, I'd like to share a little bit of what came up for me. The opening, I called my memoir Homecoming, and I started off with a poem. And the poem was, what would it mean to have completeness, a history, a narrative, a collective uplift, marking the contribution in this ecosystem? Is there space for that? The land of wood and water, my birthplace, the initial inhabitants, no more. Deadly disease, mass murder, rape, enslavement, a legacy brought forth by greed and misguided hearts. Is there space for what has not been told? What remains for a people whose history is bound to the oppressor, whose life is under their ideals while moving towards decolonizing the mind, holding of these paradoxes? So I hold those paradoxes, and they inform the way that I curate my work, which is around inclusive well-being strategy. my trademark is we are only as well as the least well person. And that's aspirational because we don't have systems of equity. No matter how much we spin our wheels, there will be people left behind who are not taken care of. Those are the people in the margins. And I'm acutely sensitive to what it means to be in the margins. So how do we make space and expand the net that everyone is included? I'm moving closer to my knowing because I feel that this is a really ebb and flow. I continue to be in regular conversation with one of my affinity members. We text and support each other almost on a weekly basis. We Zoom once a month. We have poetry reading. We talk about what's most impactful for us. We continue to explore our racialization because even though we're in the same group, we had different identities around who we were as women and who we were as we were classified by the different racial identity in society. We continue to work towards what our self-recovery is. And I use that word because it's a word that I've learned through the reading of Bell Hook. How do I recover myself? What has been lost that I'm now recovering? And that is the really pivotal point of my year-long experience. What have I denied? Paying attention to what have I lost and what is it that I'm recovering? And each time I'm in a professional space, I pause to consider how do I make space for others and what is it that is not being spoken to and what's at the margins that I need to pay attention to. And because my aspiration is to work towards creating inclusive well-being strategies, particularly around equity, where everyone feels their best and well self, which is no longer, this pie in the sky, because our society is only as well as each of us. And we've seen that fault line during the pandemic, and we're still seeing that process in terms of how unwell we are in many areas of our lives. I'm still learning, I'm still leaning into that. And it's still, this experience has really fueled me to wake up to my life more fully. It's not perfect, what I'm doing. At times I stumble, yet I give myself grace. And that is one of the biggest part of being vulnerable in a space where I'm being held and witnessed by others. It was the best year and it was the hardest year. I strongly suggest if you're thinking about engaging to really lean into it. Lean into learning more about what it means to embody who you are. I think I went over 3 minutes.
And I loved every word of it. So thank you so much for that rich reflection and the vibrancy of it and how it's still cooking and living in you. And, it just reminds me of how we're never really finished, right? We're just composting and adding ingredients and, more water when it's dry and more air when it's stuffy. And I just appreciate you and your process. And thank you, Navalette, for being willing to come and share that with us.
Thanks for inviting me, Ruth. I appreciate the invitation. Mm-hmm.
So I think with that, it might be good to just kind of open it up to some Q&A, and then I'll talk a little bit about next steps for us. And then if you choose to stay on, we can just put you in some affinity groups to just begin to just share a little bit about who you are and why what your heart is aspiring toward, and considering this program just to connect with each other. So to begin, let's just see if there's any questions that you have. that I might be able to answer. And we will let Anna, what's the best way for me to do this? Should I just see the hand on my screen and unmute? Okay, I can do that.
I'll be happy to unmute as well.
Okay. Well, why don't you call on the people to unmute, and I'll just try to.
Hi, I'm Mignon. And I apologize if this question was in the Q&A. I did review it a little bit. I'm just curious, are we coming with our affinity group or it's assigned within?
Great question. So if you have other people that you know you want to do this journey with that are leaders and that you want to kind of join with them, and they're joining this with you, they're signing up as well, you can indicate that on your application form, and we'll do our best to try to put you together. It's not a guarantee, but we'll do our best. Most people are not a part of an affinity group, so you will be assigned. You will be kind of put together based on what's on your application as best we can. It is not going to be a perfect match. Depending on the number of people that are here, it may be more like a mosaic group. It may not be a totally racial affinity group. It depends on the numbers, but it will be, you will be in a group of aspiring people who want to take a deep dive into this work. So we will assign you if you don't have a cohort. If you have a few people, we might add to it. It just depends on what the mix is going to be. So thank you for that question. Yeah. Okay. Should I call on Sean? Is it Sean?
It's Shan. Hi, Ruth. Thank you so much. How are you doing? And thank you so much for this offering, for one, taking the time with us today, and then two, this great offering that you're serving up. Just one question about who do you have in mind for a program like this? Now, I know it says leader. I know it says, but I get all that. But I'm just curious about what type of person are you looking for to go through a program like this?
Yeah, good question. I think it's I think I'm open to being informed around that a bit, but if I were to just answer it from where I sit now, I'm looking at people that are actively serving the community, and I'm looking for people that are open to a structured engagement, people who can commit to the journey, can commit to the journey. People, I think, who have been, I think, have some experience in leading groups or facilitating discussions or influencing the well-being of other people. People who may have done some work on their own trauma already, because this is not a trauma group. It's it's people who are, for the most part, stable enough to reflect and dive and be engaged with their peers. And I hope I'm not offending anyone with that. This is a leadership development opportunity for people. So we're looking at some competencies around context, perspective, stability. So yeah. So I think there's some level of experience. I'm assuming leadership in a broader sense of the word is that you're kind of you're in a position where you can influence the thinking, the well-being of others. and you're looking to be fortified, supported, ripened into a deeper awareness of how to be stable and in the complexity of all of that, and how to just continue to purify your perspective. Does that help with?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I guess I'm really interested in this because I actually work for the government in my regular work, but I'm also an aspiring Dharma teacher. So I don't know if you have to have any affiliation with the Dharma as a Dharma teacher yourself, but I was just curious about that aspect too.
Yeah, it's not a Dharma program, it's not a Dharma training program, but it's heavily influenced by Dharmic principles, Buddhist psychology, as well as Western psychology. Yeah, yeah. So you will get meditation instructions. You will get, you will be invited to learn how to be still and to rest more in your own skin. You'll be getting a lot of practice on that. A lot of invitation to be quiet, to be contemplative. So yeah, but I'm not teaching Dharma, and I'm not teaching you how to be a Dharma teacher. I'm teaching how you are able to influence through your own expression, through your own work, through your own, fields of influence. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Who else has a question? Okay. So this is good. So we have a little time for me to talk about what the next steps might be for us if you're interested in moving forward. And let me just see, I have a little graphic here. Let me see if I can show it. Can you see that okay? All right. So this is all on the website already, so you don't have to write it down because it's there. But just some key dates. The application deadline is June the 30th, and once we get all the applications in, we'll have a good sense of how to configure, how to think, how to put some things together, and how to accommodate the range of interest and requests that are happening. So we're going to be holding that very tenderly in our thinking. And then by the, let's see if this is giving us what we want better. Here we go. So the applications, you'll get a confirmation by the 15th of July for that you're confirmed. The payment will be due by August the 1st. Again, we have I think there's 5 levels of payment in the range. There is a 3-month payment plan option for you. And so that's there. So that's all on your application process. Once payment is received, we'll have a period of time where we can put the affinity group configurations together. So we'll put them together and we'll send out that notice. And then we will be inviting you during the period of the 10th and the 20th to meet up with your affinity group. So we'll give you information on how to do that. Anna Shoemaker here, who you've met, who welcomed us, will be your point person. She's the project manager and also the business manager for the Institute. So know that she will be your contact person. So we will give you Anna@ruthking.net. You can reach out to Anna. August 25th through the 27th is the prerequisite course, Mindful of Race 101. This is a combination of how is this going to go? What this looks like is on the 25th from 6:30 to 7:30, we'll have a live Zoom and program overview with me. So everybody needs to be at that. On Saturday, all day, it will be your self-study period time. So there will be content on the portal that you go through, and lessons and instructions and meditations that you go through. You could expect to spend anywhere from 5 to 8 hours on that content, taking your time, kind of being with the information and the exercises and the reading assignments that are there. The practices that are meditation practices that are there as well. And then on Saturday, we'll have another live Q&A time with me. Everybody needs to attend, and this will also be a time where you connect again with your racial affinity group. So that's what we'll be doing for this particular course. And then in September, we will have the Brave Space kickoff, and that's a must attend. That's September 23rd. It's from 1 to 4 o'clock, and it's the orientation of the program and, just how to get everything you need well situated and understood so that you can begin your process. The coaching sessions with me, it's a large group, so it's a full cohort. We'll be coming together 6 times over the year, and these are the dates. It's from 1 to 2:30. This is where you get to ask your questions about what's happening in your group, any snags you're running into, anything that's coming up for you. So in these sessions, I'm going to be inviting more of a U-turn about if you're experiencing something in your group, for example, a snag because you're in the control stage, for example, there's a conflict that hasn't been spoken, what have you. The invitation becomes, how are we applying the framework, the Mindful of Race framework that's introduced in this fundamentals course? How are you applying the framework to address the issue that you're experiencing and living real time? So this is the craft, if you will, or the practice of integrating information about race into an embodied understanding of how we free up the holding and tension that's often in our bodies and hearts around this work. So we're wanting to apply what we know and see how it's working, and then see how that gets improved upon. And we can get improvement from just sharing that in our group, and I'll be offering suggestions in this larger group of how you can work with that. And also in these bi-monthly meetings, some people may have questions about things they're working on in their work and how this applies to situations they're facing in the organizations or the groups that they're in. And there may be time in these meetings where that can be addressed as well. So this will be a time for us to just see how we more deeply understand and integrate and apply, if you will, what we're learning to intervene on the different environments that we're in. Now, this is not a situation where you'll be able to solve all your organizational issues, okay? So that's consulting, that's not what we're doing. It's more of what is it that we're learning that could support you in being more present and stable in the challenge that you're facing, not the solution to the challenge, but how am I showing up in it? with more stability and grace. So that'll be our focus when we come together in the coaching sessions. And then from September to the month of September of this year to the September of next year, your racial affinity group will meet as a group together each month. And you're responsible for developing your logistics, whether you get a Zoom link, whether you meet in person, however that ends up working. So you'll arrange your logistics. I encourage groups to plan your meetings for the year. You'll have a chance to do that when you meet up here, or once your group is confirmed up here and you have a meeting. The first thing I want you to do is decide together when you're going to meet each month. And I suggest just planning for 3 hours. May not need all that time, but just schedule it for 3 hours and then adapt as needed as you go through the year. There's certain times of the year, depending on the content, when you may want to meet longer, and other times where it may not be necessary. But we'll feel our way through that as we live together through this program. So September to September, you're scheduling a monthly meeting for around 3 hours. And what you're doing in that monthly meeting is how you prepare for that monthly meeting is what you get instructions on each month, your lesson plans. Your lesson plans prepare you for your meeting that you have live with your affinity group. And then September 24th is our closing session celebration. That'll be our last session that we have together. So these are dates that are on the site. And I think the most important thing here is the application deadline, and so that we can get this ball rolling. Okay. So any questions on that?
Ruth, we had one question from Selena. Are affinity gatherings self-facilitated?
Yes, that's a great question. The instructions that you will receive will be instructing you on how to be a peer-led affinity group. So you will be peer-led, and there will be, there's like group tasks. You'll get this all in the first lessons. And the group tasks are shared and maybe even rotated. You can decide that. But the idea is not that you have somebody leading your group, but that you're learning how to be peers with your power in an affinity group context. That's the idea. And because of the group development process, where you're learning about inclusion needs, control needs, and belonging needs, you're getting instructions on what that is, and also what to notice about that. And then you're given an opportunity to talk about it in your group. So the leadership is shared in that sense. We're looking at a sense of synergy as opposed to, dominant, or kind of somebody kind of controlling the scene. Now, this may be a challenge to some of us that are in leadership roles, because we're used to kind of navigating these waters and pointing very directly, and we have notions of how things should be done. But I'm going to be inviting you to really, the structure has taken all of that into consideration, and you'll be guided in how to keep things respectful, and how we heighten curiosity as we go through this process. We're really learning how to be together as a body, as a BIPOC body. We're really learning how to center ourselves. Yeah, so any other questions? Yeah, I see Kid up there.
Hi, everyone. I know we're over, so I'll just be brief here. So I just want to reiterate, it's okay if we don't have another person we're applying with. We can be grouped together, it sounds like. And the Mindful of Race 101 is built into the timeline in case we have not done that yet. And then the groups, the periodic check-ins, will have those built in as well. And then if we want additional sessions with you, Ruth, we can purchase those. Am I understanding those things?
That would be true. You can purchase those, but there are 6 that are built into the program. In terms of the September to September, that's the Brave Space. The prerequisite is August. Okay, so that's kind of like an added month, but that's a part of it. And some of you may have gone through Mindful of Race 101, but I encourage you to go through it again, because it'll just be this kind of grounding together with your cohort that I think will be really foundational for you. And I also encourage you to get the book and to start reading it, because you'll be also invited to reference certain parts throughout the year. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, kid. Okay. So before we're going to give you an opportunity, which is an option, to be in a small group discussion. And what I'm asking you to do in this group is to just share your pronoun, your location, your racial identity in your own words, because we've been using these categories. And I'd like for you to just briefly, like everybody has like 2 minutes, okay? 2 or 3 minutes. What intentions or aspirations would you bring to this program, assuming you're interested in that? And I'm assuming that because you're here. So what intentions or aspirations would you bring? Share that and give a feel for what this larger body potential is by listening to each other and what they're coming with or what they may be coming with. So it's very brief. I'm not asking you to identify your racial affinity group and unless that's just something that naturally happens. But I just want you to just have a taste of each other and the richness of who we are potentially as a collective, who we are really, whether we come together or not. This is how we are in the world. And I'm inviting you to just know that in this brief engagement, okay? So you will have the option of joining. If you don't,